Hi there. This is part two of the Church of Nowhere on the Church of Scientology, and this is my extremely lucid dream concerning the Church of Scientology, which I think contains a moral or some kind of lesson, which might be relevant to members of the Church of Nowhere, if indeed there are any members of the Church of Nowhere, which I keep on saying because probably they're not. Anyway, it was a very, very long dream, but I've got to try and précis it rather. Anyway, we were on this boat. In fact, it was based on a film called The Master. Apparently, in the beginning, Ron Hubbard, who was the founder and leader of Scientology in the beginning, had this boat called Sea Org, I think it was called. And people used to book places on this cruiser, private yacht, and study Scientology and go through Scientology auditing actually on the boat. And it was pretty much quite interesting, really, quite a novel idea at the time in the 50s. And they chugged around the coast of USA. And this is how the heroes meet up, Ron Hubbard, and who's called the Master, and his lieutenant, who is somebody else pretty famous in the mystical, esoteric field as well, who we won't name for reasons. Anyway, so I was on this boat, the Sea Org, undergoing Scientology training and auditing. And anyway, we came to this island, and there was a whole bunch of us disembarked on this island. And the minute that we disembarked on this island, literally everything kicked off, as they say. It was crazy. I mean, there were people disappearing for no apparent reason, and people reappearing. There were strange kind of creatures that suddenly attacked the group, and we had to cast a magic circle, which is a sort of circle in chalk in order to protect ourselves. And this went on and on and on. The crazy stuff, crazy, crazy. And then it began to occur to me, and I think perhaps a small bunch of people, that this stuff was going on was so crazy that we began to wonder whether, in fact, we were under the influence of some sort of mind-altering drug, because that would be the only explanation that would fit why we were sort of experiencing these really, really weird phenomena. Anyway, this went on, and I increasingly began to get skeptical and began to wonder whether we had been given some kind of mind-altering drug on the boat. And this is what we were all experiencing as a sort of mass hysteria or mass hallucination. And it would all seem so real. I mean, really, really real. But it was a bit like, do you remember that TV series Lost? Well, it was a bit like the script of Lost, but on steroids. Anyway, one of the things was that Ron Hubbard was with us, and he went off on a ferry across the sea to Britain, actually. So this island was off the coast of Britain, not the USA. And that was one of the things. And then loads of other stuff happened. And we cut a long story short. When we got back to the coastline where the Sea Org boat was actually was moored, or in fact docked. It was a dock, a crude kind of dock cut in the rock. When we got there, we discovered that everybody who had died or gone mad or disappeared or been taken off by strange creatures, they were all back on the shoreline, and everybody on the boat was cheering and waving flags. And bunting was out, and it turned out, in fact, it all had been a sort of test. But the important thing is also that although all this had been a sort of mass hallucination, the important thing is that also the various human qualities called for to deal with the situation, such as loyalty and love and compassion and sacrifice and bravery, they were real enough. Okay, they were real enough, or apparently real enough anyway, in that the hallucinations, the scenarios that we were hallucinating called for these positive qualities to be in abundance. In order to try to save people and protect people and bring people back from the dead and all this kind of stuff. And that was important. That was an important part of it. Anyway, so we got back on the boat, but I kept on seeing strange things. I kept on seeing kind of hallucinations, really, and people that weren't there, and things like that, and strange kind of curvatures to the walls and everything. And I actually met this person who was somebody that I used to know very, very sort of briefly, and not much, and a bit of an acquaintance of another mystical group which I've been in touch with, which will remain anonymous as well. But she's probably long since dead by now. And she had very bright, shining eyes, and she was sitting there. And I went up to her and I said, "Look, I still have these hallucinations are still going on for me. I don't seem to have come down off it. I'm still having a problem here." And she said, she said, "Everything that you experience is created in your mind." And she just smiled at me, and I knew what she meant. And so then I started on about Scientology. I said, "Look, I like Scientology. I think it's great, but I'm very skeptical about the church, and I don't trust the church. I don't trust the management of the church and the higher initiates and all that." And she said, "Well, I've been a high initiate for decades now, for 40 years." And she didn't look that old, really, but she said that. And she said, "The thing is that you have to understand that there's two tiers to the Church of Scientology. There's all the stuff which we sell as product, and that's to people that are never going to get it. Okay, but the people that went to this island, they're on the verge of getting it, the verge of getting the secret, and they were on a higher initiates program, basically, which is very secret and not known to anybody, any Church Scientology members, or very few of them anyway. But you were among those selected for this very special program, and the idea basically is to get the idea that." That reality is an hallucination, that reality doesn't really exist. It's all an illusion. But the qualities that this illusion call for, the positive qualities, are real in themselves, although ultimately they're not real either. But they're real in the sense that they bring out the best in you rather than the worst in you. But some people did fail the program because it did seem to bring out the worst in them rather than the best. And that was certainly true, without going into any details about that, which I can't really remember anyway. And she said, that this is a special program, but all of you have passed it. All of you have passed it, and you now know that you can ignore a lot of the things that are going on in this so-called real world, but you can't ignore some of the positive things that this real world, in quotes, actually demand of you or require of you, all the positive things that you are. So basically, even though there's no such thing as global warming, because there's no such thing as a planet, and no such thing as vivisection or animal suffering, because the animals don't exist. And yet you're playing a game, basically, which requires you to be moral and ethical, and to live by an ethical standard, or to establish an ethical standard, even though ultimately nothing actually exists. And this is an important lesson to learn. But it's also, when you really get it, in quotation marks, about this thing about the world is illusory, when you actually get it, also nothing can actually upset you, really. And she said, as far as all these continuing hallucinations go, with people running around the place that are not actually there 5 minutes later, she said, don't worry. She said, that just go with the stream of thought. Go with the stream of thought, because you will establish your consciousness. You will go back to normal, whatever normal means. you will stop seeing these people that are not there, because you do get it. It's just that part of you has to catch up with the part of you that has got it, that's got the truth, that everything is illusory, everything is Maya, or non-existent. And that's a sort of Buddhist term, Maya, which means non-existent or illusory. This world is illusory. All right. So that's, you have to go with the stream of thought until you calm down. But what also, the other thing that I got from this experience was the fact that, that despite all the crazy stuff that was going on, and despite all the fact that we were hallucinating as a group and everything, me and other people began to become skeptical. We had such a kind of idea in our heads, so much of an I am consciousness, that we knew that, we were living in a dream. We knew this, nothing was actually happening, really, that we were hallucinating. And I think that's kind of interesting as well. It was a growing awareness of, as the Upanishads call it, the sort of established in self. So we had this idea that we were established in self, and no amount of craziness and crazy hallucinations would ever stop us from feeling established in self. Indeed, the fact that we thought it was all an hallucination made us more powerfully established in ourself, in the sort of basis or reality of ourself. That nothing could actually shake it. It shook it in the beginning, all right, and we got really sort of bound up with all the drama of it, all the shenanigans and ins and outs and what people said to other people and all this. We got well into it in the beginning, but then we began to think, this is just a game, this isn't real. And so why are we reacting so much emotionally to something which is basically just like a computer game, really? And yet we did carry on being good people, in the sense we did carry on being positive and helping people, even though we knew it was a computer game. You know what I mean? And sort of like a matrix, an illusory matrix. So I just thought I'd leave all these points hanging in the air and not really come to much of a conclusion, other than basically the Church of Nowhere encourages you to write down your dreams, certainly, and to keep a non-obsessive attitude towards your dreams. And in other words, treat significant dreams as significant, but obviously don't become addicted to writing a journal or anything like that. Don't become obsessed with dreams, but just keep it real, But if you do have a dream that seems significant, write it down, remember it, and draw on it perhaps in future times when you need to draw on a lesson that perhaps this dream communicated to you.